On behalf of the First Nations Forestry Council, which include Chief David Walcom from Cooksbury, Chief Leonard Thomas from Nakasley First Nation, and Chief Mike Taskett, as well as Dave Porter, and myself, Chief Linda Price from Algacho, we'd just like to say thank you for coming to participate in this meaningful working group session. We feel that it's very important for all of us to be a part of this and to have input on our future with regard to First Nations forestry issues. So thank you.
In terms of the values, objectives, and principles of the First Nations Forestry Council, First Nations governance structure that we're recommending and that we put out, and what are key strategic goals that we need to be focusing on over the next 3 to 5 years. I want to emphasize that this, although its genesis has been within the mountain pine beetle epidemic, the Forestry Council is intended to be a province-wide policy forum for First Nations so that we get input into what the forest policy is looking, but primarily at the provincial level because that impacts us on a day-to-day basis, but also at the federal level because the federal government usually doesn't deal with us except on a reserve basis. So it is very important that we hear what you have to say and your input into what we've done here to date, so that we can move forward.
What we're going to be doing for the rest of the day after we have a quick coffee break here is that we'll be breaking into strategic planning breakout sessions. I'll be facilitating the values, objectives, and principles. Christy Stewart will be facilitating the governance section, and Terry TG will be facilitating the strategic goals. The input we receive from these breakout sessions will provide the council with the design directions and outcomes that you want, and also identify priorities.
When you talk to the Ministry of Forest, the district and regional office, they've got a hierarchy that they can fall back on for support around policy and legislation. We don't have that process right now, and I think the First Nations Forestry Council can provide that and provide support to the Leadership Council, because we're running into some pretty big issues around the forest and range agreements and opportunities, and that's what I've stressed to them. Right now they can go talk to the deputy minister, the regional manager. We don't have a place we can vent our issues right now to receive support.
So the type of support that you're looking at, is it technical, political, operational?
What we're faced with right now, and that's
everybody is FROs, FRAs. It's nobody's sharing that. It's something they're holding it close to their chest. They're not letting anybody know. If they're failing, they're not letting anybody know. But if they're succeeding, they're still not letting anybody know. So we don't trust each other enough to share.
And I think there's things to share and not, like, you don't necessarily have to share what you're going to do in business. Like, are you going to make more money? But we should be sharing.
We're being played with it. Or even somebody's getting a better deal than you. So.
Like I said, lean and mean kind of as they are now, serve as a negotiating team, almost as a very specialized arm of the Leadership Council so that they can go directly in.
The governance side that you have proposed there, they're governing and keeping things in check to make sure that that's what it wants. I'm not sure which way you want to go with this. You have two prongs on both explanations.
They wanted more resources, they wanted more technical staff in their area, in their region, that they were able to access on a two-prong basis. They could use them as resource people if they needed something, if they needed advice, if they had somebody coming into their community.
I'll summarize the objectives, missions, and values. I've done them in reoccurring themes that I heard today, not in any particular order of importance. The first is to be self-sufficient in the long term through revenue sharing agreements and that we should be looking at the mountain pine beetle funding as interim dollars. It's important that we don't compete with the First Nation communities or tribal councils for funding. And that one of the highest values that people saw for us, for the First Nations Forestry Council, is to communicate and to create networks amongst First Nations and their institutions. By having regular newsletters, are some of the examples that were given, to the development of a database that would list best practices, various business statistics, working agreements, and also list of preferred consultants. It's important that the Forestry Council recognizes the diversity of First Nations, the diversity of the coastal, the interior, the central and northern interior, and also that forestry means everything in the forest, not just the trees. The message that's also coming through is that the council needs to capitalize on the opportunities now. We need to act proactively, focus on areas that will have the greatest impact, develop pilot projects to test First Nations ideas and strategies, take the adaptive management approach versus the waiting. And it was also said many times that the First Nations Forestry Council should be here for the long term, that we need to ensure that our political leaders that are on the council are there for the long term, or a long term as well, and that we are sustainable. And like Terry, there was a lot of really good feedback today, and I just wanted to thank you guys for everything that you provided for my section of the workshop.
One of the ones that continue to come up was lobby for reform, whether it be through policy. We need different policies that have First Nations input. Lobby for reform with tenure. Is it possible that we have our own First Nations Aboriginal tenure? And lobby for more revenue sharing, not just as per capita allocation of wood and money. And another priority that we saw was in these sessions here was be an advocate for First Nations forestry, First Nations goals and values, whether it be for certification, be FSC, or maybe our own Aboriginal certification, and be an advocate for best practices, so to protect our sensitive areas in our traditional territories. One right here that came up in a couple of these breakout sessions was focus on regional and local issues. You know, before we can go anywhere internationally, or we need to focus on our own issues in BC. You know, whether it be for tenure reform or policies. You know, we got to focus and get a strategy, and have about 8 pages of a laundry list of all our needs and wants. But you know, we got to shortlist that. Concentrate on and prioritize what really is important within our traditional territories and what's common among all First Nations communities. Gain more jurisdiction, not only on timber, but also land and other markets that are out there, existing markets internationally, maybe nationally. And gain jurisdiction over issues that are under question, such as non-timber forest fires. You know, what are we going to do about it? We have to gain jurisdiction. It was really exciting getting these new initiatives, or new ideas, or strategies and goals, and thank you for your input. Thanks.
So we have a strategic plan that ideally needs to be ratified somehow or another by BC First Nations. If that is that we send it out to each and every one and then offer them a certain timeline to get back to us on their comments. If it's presented at the First Nations Summit or the BCAFN or the UBCIC meeting, somehow that information needs to get back to First Nations. They need to say, yes, we agree that those are the priorities, or that there's some other things we feel that you may have missed that you need to reconsider. At that level, we still decided that 5 members on this FNFC is a good idea. People brought forward that they would like to see that continuity that was presented, and that we would like at least two of the first chiefs, let me just think, two of the Mountain Pine Beetle Working Group chiefs to remain on the First Nations Forestry Council for at least 1 year to assist in the transition of the new Forestry Council, or the next term of the Forestry Council. It was presented there may be an opportunity for some conflict of interest, some political motivations in these two groups, and that you would like a governance standing committee kind of struck up, which is independent of that. In the governance standing committee, because we're basically responsible to the leadership council, we would like one member from each of those organizations, again the AFN, the First Nations Summit, and the UBCIC, to be on this committee. We would like someone from the First Nations Forestry Council to be on that committee, so that they can pick a person with the skill set to do what they need to do on this board. Ideally, it'd be someone who is on his way out or her way out of that board. And then, so a group of 5 would basically, let me just look this over here. I'm going to flip back and forth between these for a little bit here. So this is the appointment process. That province-wide call for nominations. The idea is that in the next few months, in the next few weeks, we'll be looking for 3 members that we'd like the first 2 chiefs, of course, to remain. That these people have some type of negotiating skill set, that they are First Nations, and that this is an independent term, independent of if they are a chief or a councillor, that if something was to happen to their term, during their term on the First Nations Forestry Council, that they would remain and uphold their commitment to the First Nations Forestry Council for the time that they said that they would. Then that governance standing committee would come into play that we talked about. These people would then decide who the best person or persons were to fill the 3 positions that would be available on the Forestry Council, and that recommendation would go to the Leadership Council, who would then take that to their individual assemblies. So then a discussion would be held again at the First Nations Summit, Union BC Indian Chiefs, and at the BC AFN. This process would only exist for the First Nations Forestry Council board members. The Advisory Council would get as far as the Governance Standing Committee. Governance Standing Committee would make those recommendations to the Forestry Council, who would then make the final decision. The idea behind that advisory board, as we talked about, ideally we would like a balance between regional representation and professional representation. We want people that can speak the policy language, that know about forestry, that know about biology, that understand fisheries and hydrology issues. That's the wish list for who would serve on that board. It's also cognizant of the fact that there are some people that are not going to be at those general assemblies, that some First Nations don't necessarily agree or buy into the Leadership Council. So we'd like to have some type of an open forum where there could be a discussion on the strategic plan outside of that, whether that's a 1-800 number, something on the website, a person that they can call and contact, so that we at least allow for the opportunity for other people to have input on that, if in fact the First Nations Forestry Council is to serve all of the First Nations. Very different from the other meetings. So very interesting for me. Thank you guys very much for coming, and that's it. Thank you.
I believe this initiative is timely. It's the Mountain Pine Beetle Initiative. The attack, the epidemic is giving us as First Nation representatives a chance to come together. So there is a positive in that as well too. It's important that we as First Nation technicians come here and provide support and input to this, and also ensure that the initiative that is progressing at this level complements and supports what's happening at the local level. And with the St'át'imc Chiefs Council, the St'át'imc Nation are in government-to-government negotiations right now. So it's important that this supports and complements that. And as well too, I have a very deep interest in our culture and fish and wildlife, Mother Earth, and I want to make sure that, I guess, as we come and give input here, that we not forget that as we move ahead in forestry and community economic development, that those values as well are addressed. So to me, it's gratifying to be able to come here and be part of this.